In today's video, I am going to be breaking down what a zone defense is, how you can teach it, and of course, different ways that a zone can be beat so that your zone cannot be beat. Anyways, or at least you hope. There's always ways of beating most zones, but if you want a zone that is unbeatable, make sure to go check out the Unbeatable Basketball Zone Defense book down in the description below, because in that zone, you're going to be doubling the low post while trapping the corners and not leaving any players open. So let's get down. Let's check out the basics behind what a zone really is. Okay, so in a zone, for example, right here, we have a 2-3 zone. How it is named a 2-3 zone is because there's 2 players up top and 3 players in the bottom. Now, let's say you were running a 2-1-2 zone. You would have 3 lines of defense. You would have a 2 and a 1 and a 2. Now, really quickly, I do want to say that if you run a zone defense perfectly, and I mean perfectly, it will look like a man-to-man defense. Now, if you run a man-to-man defense perfectly, and I mean absolutely perfectly and flawlessly, it'll also look like a zone. So that is when you start seeing teams that you're like, I don't know if they're running a zone or not. They're running a really, really good defense, a really good defensive system, and they probably have a very good coach. So let's get down. Let's check out what a 2-3 really is and understand, because, of course, this is the zone that pretty much every team runs in the entire world. So in a 2-3 zone, what you're going to have is player 1 guarding this area, player 2 guarding this area, player 3 guarding this area, player 4 will be out here, and player 5 will guard this massive spot. Now, player 5, I will say this. While player 5 may be in the middle and may have the biggest zone and covering pretty much the entire key, he has the most important job on the court, and that is to vocalize what is happening and what the offensive team is doing. He needs to say, screen left, screen right for the ball handler, and he needs to be able to say, hey, watch back door, back door, because he may be moving up to the high post. Player 5 needs to be the captain on defense. While the captain on offense may be the quarterback, or in this, I say the quarterback, but it's the point guard. But the captain on defense is the center. He needs to be vocal. So you will also notice that there are spots in this zone that overlap. Now, these are very, very important spots to understand, and to understand how to beat a zone. Because now, if that ball is in that gap, those 2 players need to guard, or at least should guard, that player, depending on how your coach or how you coach your team. So for example, if player 1 has the ball at the point, I would have player 1 guarding the ball and player 2 guarding the high post, the free throw line. Now this turns that zone into a 1-1-3, but this is not something that is going against what a 2-3 zone really is. I just have players 1 and 2 at the top. They keep on switching their sides because I do not want the ball in the high post. If I am running myself a 2-3 zone, that is me saying to the other team, I do not believe in your ability to shoot the ball. So I'm running a 2-3 zone, and I'm covering the high post because guess what every team does to try and beat a zone? They pass the ball to the high post. And because they run that high post offense 98% of the time, if I have a guard who is fronting the post and I've got a tall guy in the player 5 who is on the back of that player who's in the high post, if you lob it, my center is going to tip it. If you try to bounce it in, my guard is going to steal it. So you can't get the ball into the high post, which then freezes their offense. And then they have to call a timeout. They have to try and figure out a play that's going to work. And of course, that takes a lot of time, and it usually freezes them if they don't have a player who can shoot. So for example, if we're in that 2-3 zone, what I switched into a 1-1-3, if player 1 passes to 4, player 2 sprints out, covers that player, and then we have player 1 covering that high post. Because a lot of times when teams pass to that side, what they're going to have is, of course, a player who will go to the high post, in which case we have a man there, and we can't have any high to low post passes because player 3 will not be able to get that ball. So there's a quick tip. If you want to run a 2-3 zone, that is one fantastic way of doing so. However, to teach the zone, how I would personally do it, and this goes for any zone. You can go for a 2-3 zone. It can go for a 3-2 zone. It doesn't matter. When we pass that ball around, I want to see player 2. He's going to be covering player 4. Player 1 will be covering that post. If we pass to player 2, player 4 will be on it. Player 2 will be in deny. Player 5 is going to watch that low post. Player 1 is going to watch the high post. And player 3 kind of watches the swing pass, or the skip pass out, because we don't want any skip passes against the zone. If the zone is ran this way, a high to low post pass is pretty well non-existent, and you're in single coverage against any overload or super overload offense. So you don't need to worry about any issues about trying to get, or having the other team get that ball into the key or anything like that. Obviously, if player 2 tries to attack this gap, player 2 and 4 need to collapse. Player 1 needs to move over and cover these two guys. Player 3 needs to move and cover this side. Either way, you need to be able to swing that ball around, teach the guys where they need to be on defense. Obviously, if we swing it back around to this side, we're going to have player 3 out here, player 5, player 1, player 2, player 4 is watching this side. And this is one of the reasons why I personally don't like coaches that run a zone without teaching a zone, or if I just start running something random. Sometimes what you will find is a lot of younger players, when they are running a zone, they'll be told, hey, this is your zone, this is your area, you cannot leave this area. So they basically start ball watching. Oh, the ball's over there, the ball's back over there. And they just keep on ball watching. They don't even sometimes have their hands up to cover the passing lanes, because that's something that you want to do in a zone, because it's a lot harder to pass the ball on this than it is on this. So they start ball watching, and then maybe somebody drives right by them, and then they say, oh, well, now it's somebody else's problem. I don't need to worry about that guy anymore. Whatever it may be, right? So basically, they need to learn how to shift in their zone so that they can actually cover the gaps and, of course, double team the gaps. One of the most funniest things or stories that I can tell you is I was beating a team by well over 100 points. We were playing a man-to-man defense inside the 3, because at that point, you got to just allow the other team to try and do something, because when you're winning by over 100 points, it gets embarrassing for pretty much both sides. It's a waste of time for the winning team. So we were running just a man-to-man. I said no doubles, no traps, no nothing. Just allow them to dribble. And if you have that steal, you can take it. And then we can run through our offense, because we're already up by 112, 114 at that point. We ended up winning the game by 116. But the other team kept on complaining. And what they were complaining about is, oh, they're in man-to-man. Man-to-man's so much better than zone. Like, and then the convener came over to me, and he's like, can you run a 2-3 zone against them? And I was like, you understand that's a double? And he said, well, if you run a 2-3 zone properly, it's not a double team. And I'm like, you're wrong there, buddy. A 2-3 zone, anytime you attack a gap, is going to be a double team. And we know how to run a 2-3 zone, and I will definitely be freezing this team if we run it. So he said, that's how the other team wants, so go run a 2-3. Well, that team didn't score for the rest of the remaining of the game, and one of the parents came onto the court yelling and screaming and saying that it wasn't fair and whatever else. So while there may be people who think that a zone is very easy to score against, it's actually very hard to score against if it is ran properly. It's not just kids standing there watching the ball. So I hope that this video has helped you. Make sure to go check out my Unbeatable Basketball Zone Defense book down in the description below. It's a zone that I use on every single team that I coach, and I freeze a lot of teams with it. Anyways, I hope that you've enjoyed. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys again next time.